Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, and today I'm hanging out with James Gray. And you have a bunch of credits to your name. You do a lot of freelance work. You're also part of Playground Adventures, which we've had, Stephen Rowe on. We've had BJ Hensley on. So we're slowly but surely getting all of you guys and hunting you down and collecting like Pokemon.
I went Pokemon hunting this weekend over at the mall. That was fun.
Is that still a thing? People are still doing that?
There are still people doing that in their gyms, and yeah, it's still a thing. I mean, it's calmed down, but there are enough people still playing it. They're making money, so they're still doing it.
Nice.
It's good exercise. It's a good
So,
excuse to exercise.
so as always, guys, in the description, if you're on the YouTube page, we have links to various things that James has worked on, social media. You can check that out. If you happen to be on Twitch or Facebook, come over to the YouTube channel and check the description. You can get all those links. So, what are you currently working on? What's or have coming down the pipeline?
Oh gosh, so I mean, it's one of those things. You're always dancing, you know, to stay or running to stay in one place. For Playground Adventures, there's the Last Unicorn role-playing game, which I can't talk too much about because I'm still under the NDA and we haven't released too many details yet. That's all up to BJ. And a Camp Myth RPG, which is imagine a role-playing game about mythological creatures going to summer camp, and those are both going to share a system, which I think BJ talked to you a little bit about before when she was on.
Yeah, we definitely. I believe we announced the last Unicorn RPG. The
Yep.
other thing, I'm not sure if we talked about that one or not, but we may
Yeah, we
have.
talked about that specific. I think I watched it. It's been a little bit,
Yeah.
um, but it's based off a series of self-published novellas. There was a role-playing game from Third Eye Games for it. They they are a pretty good company. I recommend checking them out too. They do the PIP system, but then they kind of stopped, and we picked it up, and we're going to see what we can do with it because it's a neat world. You got the Cyclops teenagers and Pixie teenagers and Fairy teenagers all going to summer camp and having to earn merit badges by doing things like Phoenix watching, which is a lot tougher than it sounds because Phoenixes tend to set the forest on fire when they're around, or Kraken fishing, or Cyclops archery, or navigating a Minotaur maze. So there'll be adventures built around that idea, and it'll use the Uni system, which is the same system we're developing for the Last Unicorn. It's going to be the idea is it's easy to play, but modular, so you can keep adding. GMs and players can add new rules and plug in as opposed to lay on top. You know what I mean? Like
Okay.
old AD&D, it got to the point where you're laying rules on top of rules and everything had its own subsystem. These rules are designed more that there are spaces where you can plug in levels of granularity, so that if you, for example, want to have a simple rule that says, start off with a simple rule that says if you are in a difficult terrain or doing some kind of unusual movement, your movement's reduced. That's fine. But if you want to get into rules that are very specific about your climbing, it reduces you by this much. If you're in tall grass, it reduces you by this much. If you're on slippery sand, it reduces you by this much. And you can have that level up to you what you want. And, so you can have it as easy or it has simulationist as you desire.
So, what do you mean by PIP system? I'm not familiar with the term.
Okay, Third Eye Games, which is a great company, they did Camp Myth before us, and they did the PIP system. It's not us. PIP system is a success-based system. You roll, you get successes. It works with D6s, and they have put out Camp Myth and Mermaid Adventures and a bunch of other neat niche RPGs. And they've been nominated for an Emmy a few times for various games. They're a neat system. I can't remember Eloy's last name, but you can find him online. He'd be a great person to have on the show too.
Oh well, if you want to make an introduction, we'd be more than happy. We like
Yeah, I could go there.
we like casting a broad net and getting all kinds of different people on the show.
Yeah, he's a neat guy, and they're doing some new things. He's part of the. I don't know if you've seen the New Agenda group. They're kind of a conglomerate of people trying to bring more designers of color and diversity into things?
I did. I reached out to them. They're
Yeah.
not. They're not. Maybe they're still working on getting together. Who manages the social media and stuff?
Yeah, I'll send him a note saying you're interested, because he's always, because they can use more press. Everyone can use more press.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I guess we had. I DM'd them. They had gotten back to me. I got back to them, and now I'm waiting. But if this is another project in addition to their other projects, I can imagine it's an easy thing to fall off. Even just having like one base where you're working on things, it's easy to miss stuff.
Yep. So that's for the Adventures. For Fat Goblin Games, I run their Castle Falkenstein line, which is Castle Falkenstein's classic RPG put out by Artels Orion back in 1994. It's kind of for ease of shorthand, I call it steampunk, but it's more like gaslight fantasy. You got magic and fairies in the world of Jules Verne and Sherlock Holmes. And Fat Goblin Games got the license 2 years ago to create new material for it, because they stopped producing material back in '96. And we've put out a bestiary, adventures, rules variations. Right now I'm working on a book for automatons, which is everything from clockwork people to Frankenstein's monster.
And what system is that for?
That is Castle Falkenstein. It is its own unique system that uses cards instead of dice. It's designed from the ground up to give you the feel of the world. And so it's the only game that uses that system. It's unique to it.
Okay, so you get a lot more resource management that way.
Well, you essentially, you have abilities. The abilities have suits. Physical abilities are clubs, emotional abilities are hearts, and so forth. And you have cards, and you want to try to match the cards you're playing to the suit. So I like to call it a whist or spades or hearts or any other game that has trumps. A system like that where you're almost playing a bit of a card game in a strategic way in addition to the role playing itself. And it's very Victorian because Victorians play cards all the time.
So I'm fascinated by that. Like steampunk is one of my new guilty pleasures. I literally started reading a lot more steampunk and listening to a lot more steampunk books just because I was like I cannot go through one more fantasy book. I just need something different. And Ministry of Peculiar Occurrences is like one of the ones I think I started with, which is really good. But I do love that idea of meshing and mismatching, fantasy with steampunk.
Yeah, Falkenstein is an alternative. It's literally an alternate universe where our world is. They call it the Fourth Earth because it's based on the fairies live in the energy void between worlds, and they visited various Earths, and they went to the first Earth, and the second Earth, the third Earth, and Falkenstein is the fifth Earth. And they are, in addition to the fairies existing, and dragons, which are descendants of pterodactyls, who learned how to use magic. So they're literally flying dinosaurs, intelligent flying dinosaurs with magical abilities. There's the fairies, there are the dwarves, and there are sorcerers who perform a ritual-like magic in which you don't cast fireballs. You define your spell based on a series of definitions. You gather your power, and once you have it, you can release it and the spell is cast. It is not a use in the middle of combat magic, but it's still very powerful. So it's more like almost like building an invention. Each spell is more like building something rather than having a superpower.
So, guys, if you have questions, just remember to put question in front of them, and it makes it much easier for us to pick them out. But Andrew has a question for you about Falkenstein. And when you first put that in the chat when we were talking earlier, I thought I read Frankenstein, but
it's called the Falkenstein Castle. Falkenstein Castle. If you know your German history, there was a mad king named Ludwig II, King of Bavaria, which is one of the German countries before Germany became fully Germany. And he liked to build castles, and he had a fairy tale castle commissioned for design and never quite got built. And you see it every time you go to Disney World because that's what they use as the basis for Cinderella's castle. And it's this beautiful fairy tale castle. And in the Castle Falkenstein world, it not only got built, it's the base of operations for a secret society that is dedicated to stopping the Unsullied from destroying the world by introducing technology too quickly.
Oh, so it's the fairies introducing technology. I love it.
Yeah, basically, because the fairies have been to other Earths, they know, and history is roughly the same in each Earth. They have an idea of what's going to happen historically, and the Unsullied want the world to be for them, and so the Sullied want the world to be as equitable as possible. And the Unsullied are saying, yeah, we'll happily teach you how to secretly make guided missiles using the technology you have. We may have to make some changes. You may have to use steam-powered missiles. You might have to use a pigeon and this is actually something they tested in World War II, using pigeons to guide missiles by having them tap on the screen. But yeah, it's a fun thing. And the neat thing about it is, imagine this: you can go to a lecture by Darwin on dragon evolution, and you can be sitting behind two people discussing the matter, and you can realize that one of the people is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and the other person is John Watson.
Yeah, I actually lied when I said Ministry of Peculiar Occurrences. It was actually Mark Hoder's series, Sir Richard Burton and Swinburne, was actually what really got me into steampunk, which is alternate Earth stuff as well.
Yeah, there's a couple of them. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I want to say Philip K. Dick. Greg DeCamp did a whole thing where he tied together various Victorian characters into a combined world. That was one point fast. But somebody had a question, and I completely interrupted. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I got it highlighted so I get back to it. Do opponents GM play their own cards, or are cards a player only thing?
The host is the GM's called a host, and the host has a hand under most circumstances, which they can use to increase the base difficulty of the task. I use that hand, when I'm running the game. I use that hand for mooks and non-important NPCs, and then I give important NPCs their own hand of cards, and they all draw from the same deck. There's one deck, not as opposed to one deck per character. So if someone has a Queen of Spades, that's the only person with Queen of Spades at that time.
Sweet. So I guess this is going to be more like system agnostic, but how do you go about handling, since we kind of I teased it in the title, I definitely want to jump on puzzles a little bit and talk about that, because I feel like a lot of DMs struggle with that. I know I've struggled with it in the past. I usually just resort to Googling to look for puzzles. So what are some tips you can lay down in that regards?
That's the first thing I'd say is a lot of good puzzles have been written. You don't feel like you have to reinvent the wheel. Feel free to Google stuff, and just there are some fantastic puzzles out there which you can find for free without having to pay for a book of puzzles, so you can get them from the local library. The biggest thing is your puzzle has to make sense. Don't throw a puzzle in just because you want to throw a puzzle in. Throw a puzzle in because it makes sense. You know, is the puzzle a lock on the door? Why is it a lock on the door? You know, and also always have a way around it if you have to, because if it gets frustrating, you can hand wave it with a roll, remembering that sometimes characters are smarter than their players, sometimes players are smarter than the characters, and so that is the biggest problem with puzzles. Actually, is that puzzles challenge the players, not the characters. You get into a fight with a goblin, the goblin challenges the characters, not the players, except for maybe some strategic elements, knowing which moves to make. Puzzles are almost entirely challenging the players. Have a hint system where they can roll to get hints, kind of get an idea of what hints you want to offer in advance. Have your puzzles make sense. The Indiana Jones movies, fantastic examples of puzzles making sense within the context of the adventure. Like the library in the Last Crusade, where you had to find the X, literally mark the spot. That was a simple puzzle. Or the floor tiles, where you had to guess the right floor tiles to stand on. The use of the staff and the medallion in the first movie to pinpoint, and knowing that was a small little puzzle, which was really neat. So that's some really good examples of how puzzles make sense. They can be challenges, like if a wizard wanted to make sure that the right people found The smart people found his hidden stash of library books. He can put up a library, a door puzzle to make sure that only intelligent people can solve the puzzle and get inside. But it doesn't make too much sense for a bunch of goblins to have a puzzle on their door unless it's from some ancient civilization, you know?
I almost like using like a double gradient DC system for that kind of stuff. Like not only for the characters that are actually that stuff would be easier for them mechanically already because they have the right skill or they have the higher intelligence, but I also will kind of like skew things because I like to, like I said, use a gradient system where it's not like pass or fail so much as, DC, 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever, depending, you get X amount of information. And if they happen to be trained in it, or maybe trained in multiple skills where there's crossover, I actually just make it easier for them to try to get it, so that when I'm giving out hints or clues or information.
That makes sense. And you've got to adjust for the characters and the players. You got to know your players. If you got a bunch of players who hate riddles, don't throw in riddles. But if none of your characters have engineering knowledge of some kind, and your puzzle depends on having engineering knowledge, it's just like throwing a high-level monster at a low-level party. You know that that's not going to succeed, and you got to want them not to succeed. You got to have a reason for that. You've got to be. This is another day puzzle as opposed to this is the puzzle you solve right now. Otherwise, I think that's core adventure preparation.
Now, TrueBait wants to know, what do you do when your party's not getting anywhere with the puzzle? And I think you answered that a little bit in the sense where you said, have this not be the only place where they can go, have a way around it.
Right. Like this is a very D&D Pathfinder example. Say you have a puzzle that's a lock. A lock puzzle is Resident Evil style, video game wise, and maybe you can have a disable device check to just bypass it entirely if you prefer. Though maybe they get a special reward if they solve the puzzle as opposed to smashing down the door. Maybe if you solve the puzzle, they get a bonus to whatever is on the next side. Maybe the spell goes off. Solving the puzzle triggers, not only opens the door, but triggers a less spell, for example. So there's a reward for solving the puzzle, but the puzzle's not the only way to get through the door or the lock or across the room.
So you've been dubbed with the nickname or the title of Professor of Puzzles
Yes.
by BJ. How did that come about? What earned you that title?
The first thing I wrote for BJ was an adventure involving pirates, and I think there was this point where I just wrote it, and there were, I want to say, 3 or 4 puzzles in it. There was a light-up puzzle, the kind where if you touch, you have a grid of, say, lights, and if you touch one light, it turns off, and all the lights that are touching it turn off, and if you touch it again, it turns on, and you had to get all the lights on. It's a very electronic puzzle, but it works with coins where you can have on be one side of the coin and off be the other, forming the grid. And then there was an alchemical puzzle where you had to, logic puzzle where you had to figure out based if red is this and blue is this, then what is purple, kind of thing. You figure out the order. There's a couple other puzzles I don't remember specifically, but I did that puzzle, and then I did, I think, another adventure which puzzles in it. And after that, she says, "You gotta have puzzles and everything." I said, "I like puzzles, and they're good for kids." She said, "Okay, that's what you are. You're the professor of puzzles." She likes alliteration, I think, because Steve Rowe is the master of mechanics.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm trying to think of a good one for the person that gives out the nicknames or the titles.
Yeah, no, it's a situation thing. I think what it was I was putting in things, and their adventures at the point were big. They actually had some nice puzzles, and they had a Sudoku puzzle actually in their first adventure they ever put out, which I didn't have anything to do with, and it's a neat Sudoku puzzle. And I think I saw that and I was like, well, they like puzzles, and I like puzzles, so they won't mind if I have puzzles in the adventure. Then I've been putting them in every time I get a chance.
So do you like writing for kids? Because that's a lot of what you guys do over at Playground Adventures.
Yes, we write for kids. For example, my Wonderland series, we just finished the art for book 6. There are it's called a mini adventure path, which means that it's a series of mini 1 to 2 hour adventures that the kids can play through in an after school kind of setting, because you don't have much time after school, but you want to do something with the kids. And I write for them, but I keep in mind that the kids can be 4 years old, the kids can be 8 years old, the kids can be advanced in things, they can have advanced skills. Kids, there's a lot of variety in what kids can handle and can't handle. And one of the biggest mistakes I think everyone makes is assuming that there's one level for every age. All 4-year-olds are like this, all 6-year-olds are like this, all 8-year-olds are like this, and that's just not true. So with those puzzles, I try to make versions, easy version and a hard version. For example, in the 4th adventure, spoiler alert for those who are playing this adventure, there is a puzzle at the very end, and the simple version is a basic color puzzle involving rainbows. You have to, I believe, you have to figure out. You have to catch little stuffed bears that are running around, and you have to catch them in an order based on rainbow logic. But for the advanced version, you have to catch them. They have numbers instead of colors on them, and you have to catch them in the order of pi. And it's up to the GM to determine how many digits of pi the kids can figure out. I have one GM who just said he got to, I think, 20 digits because they had a really smart math prodigy. And I'm like, wow, good for them. I couldn't get past 5 digits of pi. So
That's funny. Thank you for that, Jacob Stokes, Mistress of Monikers. I'll have to put that down somewhere. The next time I have BJ on, I'll just hit her with it.
That is fantastic. I love that idea.
She's a great guest to have on. You also do some other stuff too, so I want to jump to some of the other things. So I actually discovered you also write for a webcomic.
Yes, Mysteries of the Arcana. 7 years, I want to say, I've been doing that.
It looks like fun. How many pages do you guys have?
We're 300-400. I don't remember the exact count, and it gets a little confusing because we have a couple of, for example, my artist right now. I took a break. He's writing some side stories, so we've got those. But yeah, we are on chapter 7. I want to say 400 or so pages. I think we're a chapter or 2 away from the finish of the big meta plot line. And we've been doing it for quite a while. 2 comics a week here, with many weeks off here and there, because it takes time, and it's not the only job. But yeah, it's been going on for quite a while. It's adventure and romance in a tarot-inspired multiverse where every tarot card is its own universe.
So it looks like they're all just like one pagers, right?
No, it's an ongoing story.
No, it's an ongoing stories, but each there's like 400 or 400 some pages.
Right. Yeah. Yes, pages, individual pages. It's written in a what I call a long format, which is the comic book format, as opposed to short format, which is like a newspaper strip format.
Mm-hmm.
And I try, especially, I don't do it as much now as I did in the beginning, but for a long time I did what I called the punchline method of writing, where every page had to end with a beat. There was a rhythm to it. If you didn't end the page satisfying, every page felt like a cliffhanger, then it gets really boring really fast for people who are reading it as it's posted in real time.
So, can you tell us a little bit about the characters?
Oh yeah, there is Crystalline, who is basically, there is a place called the Inn, which is in the Fool. The Fool is the first card in the major arcana of the tarot, and it's the gateway to all other universes. You go to the Fool, and then from the Fool you can go to any other universe. And there is an inn there where the various people who can travel through the universes stay. Some of them actually live there, and she was raised there. She's the only person who was ever raised there, and she is very spontaneous, and she is what is called a dreamer, or she's half dreamer. Her father was, which means she's the only person who can go from universe to universe on her own without the help of a device called the Royal Road, which is this big crystal thing that you activate. And doesn't quite get boundaries the way that people who are raised among kids their own age would get boundaries, and she doesn't quite get restrictions because her parents were often absent and they weren't perhaps the best at giving her guidance in what you can and can't do and when you can and cannot do it. And then she's one of the main characters, and the other main character is Teresa, who is from a world remarkably similar to our own. I'm not going to say it's exactly our world because we probably can't travel from our world to other fantasy universes, but it's very much like our own. And her father died in the Gulf War, the second Gulf War, sorry. And she was very lost, and some bad things happened to her. And she decided to go to the worst place on Earth that she could think of to kill herself. And so she went into the city and went down into the subway on a whim and found an abandoned subway station. And that's where she met Crystalline and her adventures began. Obviously, she didn't kill herself. And she's learned and become stronger and less concerned about what others think of her and the rules that are set for her. Crystaline's opposite. Teresa was following rules, and she was very Catholic and very committed to the rules that were presented to her. And she's learning how to not let the rules stop her from being herself. As opposed to Crystalline, who's learning that sometimes rules are okay. They're kind of meeting in the middle in their romance with each other, which took about 6 years to really write. It started off a little fast and then slowed down and then sped up again.
So are they compiled anywhere, or they just live on the web?
They live on the web. The first two volumes, the chapters, are in theory available on Amazon and over at Drive-Thru-RPG. And if you type in Mysteries of the Arcana, neither place, ARCANA, you will find them. There was a problem with artists. I switched artists 3 times in the middle of the 3rd chapter because the first artist couldn't do it for a while. He's back to it. He came back to it. The second artist did it for a while. She did it for a short while, and that she was a contract worker only. The third artist, she had some problems, and the fourth artist did it for a while, and then I burned out after switching artists so many times, and then a lot of the art got lost due to hard drive crashes, and without I can't take what's on the web and put it in a printable format, because it is only 72 DPI and you need at least 150 to get a decent printout, especially with high detail color images. So it may be that I never put out a complete collection of it, and it may only exist online.
No, maybe one day you could have a really successful Kickstarter and have the art recreated.
That is a possibility. That's a couple of $1,000s worth of Kickstarter. I actually ran a Kickstarter for the 5th chapter, and I've been Patreoning and supporting the comic ever since. And I thank you to all my lovely patrons, whoever you are and wherever you are, for supporting the comic and paying the artist, because I don't draw it myself.
Just get Matt Colville to walk by your Kickstarter. That's got to be worth like $10,000 itself.
Well, I figure you you get Matt Colville or Matt Mercer to just breathe on it.
Yeah.
And the money will just kind of follow the current from their lungs.
Are you following do you follow Kickstarters at all?
I know that the Stronghold Builder's Guide is set to break 7 Seas, 7 Ages.
7 Seas
record, and that is amazing, especially since it's not even a full RPG. It's a supplement.
It's a supplement. Yeah, it's Matt Colville has the best hair on the internet. That's why.
Well, I have no problem with people building an audience, and he's, by all accounts, very good at what he does. Good for him.
Yeah, but I guess that's kind of funny because he actually used to be a game designer in RPGs, and left it for video games. So
a lot of people did that. Mike Pondsmith did that over at Our Tales Roaring. He in the mid-90s, he went over to work for Microsoft because he had a kid.
Yeah. Well, you know what it is, and that's why I hate pay what you want. And people don't realize it's like we get these brilliant people in this industry, and then they go places where they can feed their family, and they don't get it. People don't get it. If you don't want to pay for your hobby, then someone else is going to get a better hobby because our talent is going there.
But yeah, it was. I think it's something that started with and you see it in comics too, where the production values got better and better and better. From the 90s on, the production values got better, the paper got better. You went from black and white to full color with all illustrations, and that costs money. It costs thousands and thousands of dollars to put together a role-playing game book, and people want even the small stuff from third-party publishers to be as good, to look as nice as the big Wizards of the Coast stuff. You know, those guys, they're lucky they sell 100 copies of something.
Yeah, that's true. But we'll move away from that gloomy topic.
Yes.
Cardboard Fortress wants to know, how do you handle a situation where a player can legitimately claim their character is much smarter than themselves? Happens to me every time I play the game, pretty much. And should be able to solve a puzzle when they cannot.
That is a great question. I think you've got some options there. One is let them roll it. You know, give them a chance. Two, just because their character's smarter than the player doesn't mean the character is smarter than the group, and there's no reason why the group can't work together behind the scenes to give the player a chance. And oftentimes brains working. Like, for example, my family and I played an Unlock Escape the Room game recently, where it's this neat game. You have these cards and you have some puzzles and things you have to figure out, and there's an app actually to work with it to tell you if you had to figure out a combination on a safe, you had to enter the combination into the app, and it tells you did it. Now flip this card. And my family and I were much smarter as a whole than we were as individuals. Sometimes I got something my wife didn't get. Sometimes my kids got something neither of us could get. All because everybody has a different perspective and a different logic system, the way their brain works. So letting players team up helps. Don't let them wander right from the table. Ask them to help each other. And if all else push comes to shove, you wouldn't ask a player to swing a sword at a moving opponent in the real world and expect them to hit, and only say their character hits if the sword hits in the real world. So you can use the same logic in a game where you're saying, you solve the puzzle based on a series of roles, and you can even add some tension there. Where you build it has multiple roles, and it's not just one role. You have to build upon success. So, like, the first role might be an engineering role, and the second role might be a perception role, to see if you can figure something out. And you can add tension that way, even if you're not doing direct puzzle solving.
It's funny you give that advice, because we've said that as well, as like collectively the group can represent the smartest character if you want, and why not have them collaborate, and then the smartest character gives that answer.
Yeah, we do it in combat all the time. It's someone else calls out a strategy idea. You shouldn't just attack that person. Remember, you have this power. So if you can do it in combat, why not with the puzzle?
And they're breaking my stones a little bit because of my comment, because one of the characters I play in one of our live streams is Jogo the Giant, who his dump stat is intelligence, and he's got an 8, but I probably play him like a 6. So.
We have a guy in the Pathfinder game I play who's just, I admire someone who can play a low intelligence character, because I can't.
I think it's fun, and it's like the key is metagaming, honestly. But you do it to the detriment instead of to an advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, if you have a good group that will play with that, like, then they go, oh, wait a minute, don't tell Jogo about this, because he's just going to blurt it out. Mm-hmm. Or he's going to react to the information you give him.
I guess it will become second nature, but I can see stopping every time and saying, I know this, but does my character know this? And then after a while, that would, just like any other quirk in a character, that would become a second nature if you play it long enough.
So I go, I know this, but my character doesn't. So he does the thing that, with that information you would never do. So, and it just makes, like, interesting and fun situations. And, I'm not all that attached to any one particular character or gaming group. So, a TPK can happen.
Yeah,
oops.
It's a hazard.
Yeah, we were going against a Rashashka, which I'm saying wrong because I can't pronounce anything. And he was reading my mind, and when he said something, I just answered it without the character thinking. And then he realized. And then after he said it, he realized he said the wrong thing, and he's like, "Uh-oh," and like people thought it was hilarious, you know, when he realizes his mistakes, but because he's slow thinking.
I think the best role playing moments come from your flaws, not your character's flaws, not their strengths.
Oh, exactly, and I just think it's so much easier to play down stats than it is to play up.
Yes, that can be true. Especially in a world where your character is supposed to know all this stuff, and the GM doesn't even know this stuff. You know, because it's a fantasy world, and not every detail is detailed.
Yeah, you know, it comes down to too, like we often talk about the fact that, and this is a real big problem with like gotcha DMing, that where your characters are immersed and live in that world all the time. You as the player like visit it once a week, once a month, however often you're playing. So things that your character is thinking about all the times, like rations, because your character gets hungry but you don't in the game.
Yeah, that makes
Like,
sense.
you know, like where I've played with DMs, is it on your character sheet? I'm like, come on. You know, one of the best things I heard was from one of the GMs that ran from it for us was Scott Garibay, and he's like, you know, for the level your characters are, they're experienced adventurers. I'm not going to keep track of your ammunition. You're not. I don't care about your ammunition and your rations. They would know this, and just don't worry about it.
Right. It's situational. If you're in a game where you're in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, keeping track of things makes sense because survival is part of the thing. But if you're you have a week to prepare for going down into a dungeon, of course you're going to bring rations. Of course you're going to bring ammunition. Of course you're going to bring a light source. Those are things you're going to get unless you have absolutely no money, and even then you'll find ways to scavenge or something. That's why Castle Falkenstein does not have an inventory system. It has a notable possession system for things that are really special for your character. Guns, your character's diary, because everyone had a diary back then. Your deck of cards if you're a gambler, stuff like that. And then it said you have an ability called Exchequer, which is this is how rich you are. And if you need something, you roll your Exchequer, or you play the cards for your Exchequer, and if you succeed, you have it. That's just that simple.
We were talking about Marvel Phase Rip earlier, and that's kind of like that too, because you have a resource score.
Resources.
Yeah, so you could just make a check and be like, oh yeah, I have that. You know, I would have that.
I think the best system I've ever seen do something like that is D20 Modern had a resources where you had to roll. You had a resource level, and you had to roll. It basically presented a target number essentially. You had to roll above it to certain things. If it was within below by like 5 points, you had it automatically. You don't have to roll. If it was 5 points to your target, your level, you had it, but your resources went down to represent the cost. If it was above, you had to roll to see if you could afford it. I thought that was a neat way of handling it.
Fourth edition, the fourth edition system for not system, but Gamma World that ran off the fourth edition system was kind of funny with ammunition, because it's like as long as you took one shot from your gun, and in a combat, you could shoot that gun indefinitely. But if you shot more than one shot, they called it going hog wild, and until the combat was over, you had ammunition. But as soon as it ended, you were done until you found new.
I always ran when I ran D20 Star Wars, always because you have energy packs. Everyone knows how long those last. I'm not gonna make you. I ran the rule of one. You rolled a 1, you're out of ammunition, and you had to change your battery back. And other than that, I think that's a decent compromise too, because it's like there's something to be said for playing a role-playing game like a video game, and doing it too much. But at the same time, if you are in a system where tension really matters, then you do the survival and the resource management. But if that's not the point, if the point is to be cool and over the top and do neat things, there's no point in the resource management.
No, exactly. It's whatever you want to get out of the game. So we got a question from Billy Bad Ace.
Hello, Billy Bad Ace.
Do you like to end the session at a puzzle so your players have out of game time to solve it and not eat table time? If they're going to cheat, they can do it in the bathroom.
We talked about that actually before. The thing is, I think longer puzzles, especially like the logic puzzles that are like character X, Y, and Z are sitting at a table, and character X is wearing a blue hat, but character Y, and character Y was drinking wine, and you had to figure it out, chart it all out. That's the kind of thing. Yeah, I would put that at the end of the session and let them work it over in the in between time, assuming you have the kind of players who are willing to put the work in between sessions. That's important. Not every player is willing. Some players, they leave it at the table and they just forget about it until the next time. But if they are, it's a neat between things. And again, you can do the reward thing. You worked on it in between sessions. That's very cool. Thank you for doing that. Here are your hero points, or your karma points, or your +2 bonus for the first thing you do in the next session. Here's something to reward you for doing it. For more complex puzzles, that's a great solution. For simple puzzles, I wouldn't mind putting it in, because I think it can be fun to take a break and play what is essentially a mini game in the middle of a game and change things up a little. It adds variety. Variety is the spice of life.
So, moving away from puzzles again, unless you guys have more questions. So, what is your favorite kind of work to do as a freelancer?
I tell my kids that I don't like to pick favorites, because then that indicates something's better than something else, if you know what I mean. And I think it takes away from the concept that everything has something that's great about it. It's like if something's your favorite, then everything else is automatically less special. I love writing. It's enjoyable. I love development. That's enjoyable. I love doing layout. That's enjoyable too. And I hate all three, because they're all horrible at the same time. But for example, writing, I love creating something. And you can't create something in the same way with development or doing layout. But I like working with people and seeing what they create and making their stuff better. And that's what development is. And I love layout. Putting together a good page is like putting together a puzzle. And I love that. So all three have their benefits. And all three, layout takes more time. It's very fiddly. And it depends on the software to work, and computers crash. And that's really annoying. And writing, sometimes, the words won't come in exactly the voice you want. And when you're writing in a specific voice, like I'm currently writing something in the voice of Frankenstein's monster, which, if you read Mary Shelley's original book, is very erudite and he's very verbose. He talks like a philosopher. And if the words won't come, that's tough, and that's very frustrating. And development, some things like, for example, developing Pathfinder, after your 10th monster stat block, you're like, I don't want to look at another set of numbers ever again. Just going through and saying, does this number make sense? And does this number make sense? And does this number balance with this number? And does this 30th rule of monster creation in Pathfinder, was it followed in making this monster? And will anyone notice if it wasn't? Yes, someone will somewhere, and then they'll complain about it.
What's the difference between developing and writing for an RPG?
Okay, if you're writing an RPG or writing for an RPG, you're writing. You are creating content from nothing. Or, for example, say I'm writing a bestiary of monsters about the Middle East. From the Middle East. I'm doing the research, I'm writing the descriptions, I'm writing the stat blocks, I am creating them. If I am developing, what I'm doing is I'm taking somebody else's stuff. Someone else wrote those monster stat blocks. I'm going over, I'm making sure they're right, I'm tweaking them it's like editing. But instead of just making sure that grammar and punctuation and readability are there, you're also making sure that everything makes sense, everything is logical. You might take someone's adventure and you might decide that what happened in Act 3 needed to happen in Act 2 and move around. It's like developing a script for Hollywood. 10 people, a script goes through 10 sets of hands before it hits filming, because everyone is refining it and making it a little better by making sure it works better. The flow works better. The stats work right. That sort of thing. That's what development is.
Thank you for that. That was really important on a personal level as well, as answering the question, because our 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 editor over at the website does a lot of editing, but what he really does is way more developing work. Now that
Mm-hmm.
you say it, I realize it, and he's got a gift for it. And he
Yeah.
gets hung up sometimes about like wanting to be doing more creating and writing. I'm like, but man, you have such a great skill that's so important that I feel like not every writer could probably be a developer.
I think if for people who aren't in the business, one way to think about it is if you GM a module, you buy a module from Paizo or Wizards of the Coast or whoever, and you take it, you look it over, and then you say, okay, this doesn't work because this happens in this village, but my characters are in this village, and this won't work because this kind of requires a bard, and I don't have a bard in the party. It's similar to that, only it's less oriented towards one party and more developing. I mean, every GM develops for their party, and a developer develops for the widest audience possible. But yeah, editing and developing, they're different skills than writing, and some people are good developers, and some people are good writers, and some people are decent at both.
Interesting. Yeah, I knew there was a skill there that was very important, but I didn't have a word for it or a title
Yeah,
for it.
yeah. I mean, it's not, you know, are they editing? Are they developing? There's a lot of overlap there, but in my mind, I see editing as going through and making sure everything looks right, is spelled right, the grammar is right, the verbs aren't passive, that sort of thing, and developing as making sure that the adventure or the module or the supplement uh, has the right mechanics and the right flow. I think those are the two, and they're often done by the same person, but I think those are the difference between the two terms.
I also enjoyed your answer in the broader question of, what do you like best? And it's you find your enjoyment in the thing you're working on in
Mm-hmm.
that aspect. It's kind of how I play RPGs, to be honest with you, because I definitely have styles that I prefer, and sometimes we'll have someone show up for us and run games in a different way, and I just think it's your job as the player to find your own fun in that game.
Absolutely, it's sometimes it's like people get very system or style locked. It's like I will only play D&D, I will only play Pathfinder, I only play Storyteller, World Darkness, Fate, whatever. And I think that you're missing something. I think that you can, if you look in most games, not all games, but most games, I think if you look and you got a decent group, you can find something that to log on to that you can really enjoy, whether it's the banter between your characters or the satisfaction of building a character. There's something in a lot of systems, and I think that's one of the reasons why we have so many systems, is because no one system can provide 100% complete satisfaction all the time.
So are you personally getting in regular gaming?
I yes, I am in a Pathfinder game in person. It took me a while to find a group where I live, but we found a good group, and we are playing in a post-apocalyptic fantasy world where something horrible happened many years ago, like 100 years ago, and the world is only starting to now slowly recover, uh, and no one knows quite what happened. They just know that two armies met, clashed. Uh, the armies vanished and the world went to hell, and like it was cursed. And we're trying to do things, and that's fun. I'm enjoying that, and it's Pathfinder, and we're using Hero Lab to keep track of things, and I thank God for that, because I don't know if I can keep track of past fifth level without software to help me. Um, but online, I run an online once a week session where I'm running a cipher game, which is Monty Cook's system.
Familiar with it?
And that's also fantasy, but much more high fantasy, and I'm enjoying that because it's. Though I love Cipher in that D20 systems like Pathfinder and D&D, everything needs to be kind of figured out beforehand. It's hard, especially when you get to higher levels. It's almost impossible to wing it. You can't just say, okay, this monster has this saving throw, because you have to remember that has that saving throw for the next time. And Cipher gives you permission in the simplicity of how it works to be weird. Like say, yeah, this monster that I just made up off the top of my head is a bear with crystals growing out of it. On the fly, I didn't have to worry about preparing the encounter beforehand, and I like that. But I like that Pathfinder makes you think about things beforehand, and so it helps you think what's the group like, and it forces you to plan, and there's something to be said about that. Those are the two things. Do you know a podcast called Fandible?
I'm not familiar with it now.
They're an actual play podcast out of New York. They're very cool. I highly recommend it. They do a lot of small and indie games, and they've got a great group with some amazing improv skills. They're also running Numenera and Shadowrun. They've run Shadowrun, and they've run a game called Honey Heist, which is about teddy bears having heists. And there's some really weird stuff. But I ran Castle Falkenstein for them, and that will be out in April, I hope. May, maybe. It depends on when they have time to edit it, because they do editing. They're a top flight podcast. I recommend them. And, I'll be hopefully running games at Gen Con. But yeah, two regular games a week, if I'm lucky.
Nice. So what is your Cypher System game?
My Cypher System game is a homebrew world called Crystallos, where there are a number of different lands, and each is based off a gemstone. So there's an onyx and an amethyst, and the sun is a turtle that flies through the sky, and it's on fire during the day, and then it hits the ocean, arcs over, lands in the ocean, the fire's extinguished, it comes back up, and it's the moon, because it's now still bright and in the sky, but no longer on fire. Then it goes back and to the other side, dips into a volcano, catches fire again, comes back out to the other side. And it's a bit of kingdom building. They've gotten a barony from the queen of the big empire there, and now they're trying to explore the barony and solve the mysteries that I'm presenting to them, which involve the idea is a long time ago, Tiamat. I brought a bunch of D&D villains to make basically gods. Tiamat and Strahd and Baron Soth and all of those. They're all gods that invaded their world through an interdimensional portal, and they were beaten back. But it turns out that there was another god who is buried in their world, and it may be buried in their barony, and they have to find this god before it awakens and ruins everything.
The Cypher System game we played, we actually played Shadowrun.
With Cypher?
With
wow,
Cypher,
that's
yeah.
a good idea.
Yeah, I feel like feel like there's a lot of people like us that like really love the world and the lore, but are not huge fans of the system.
Yeah, there is something satisfying about throwing that many dice at once, but no, I get it.
Yeah, I just find as I get older, the more I'm into rules light. I mean, D&D 5e isn't really rules light, but that's about as rules heavy as I want to go.
Yeah, I get that. You want to spend more time on playing and less time on looking things up in a book.
What kind of speaking to what you were talking to earlier, one of the things that my partner Ted really enjoys is when we used to play Mutants and Masterminds. He's like, I don't have to make up anything. I just know what power level you guys are, so I know roughly what the bonuses should be, and it's pretty much the same all the time.
I am absolutely amazed in 3 editions how they managed to distill D20 into something that works like that.
Yes. 3rd edition is like, and with each iteration, the game they got further away from D&D, and the game just got better.
Yeah, and I think that's a testament to all the people who works on it, like Steve Kenson, who is his icon system is also very good. It's a even lighter superhero system. Yeah,
I've looked at it. I have not had a chance to play with it, and I was really happy to get to meet him at PAX Unplugged, I think, is where I met him. And
I was there. I'm sorry I missed you.
Yeah, well, we're local. Actually, we're kind of local to you, really. But yeah, we're at PAX Unplugged, and we're in a bunch of cons this year, so we'll definitely have to connect. I also want to do some New York trips anyway to do some collab stuff with folks up there.
That would be neat.
Yeah, a couple we had on yesterday. They do Devil's Luck Gaming as a stream, the Twitch stream that they run, and they're out of New York. Brian Stillman is friends of ours. He's out of New York, and he's working on the Art of D&D, Eye of the Beholder, Art of D&D documentary.
Cool. I know Andrew Ragland, who develops 1897 for FASA. He's in New York now too.
Cool. Like I'm finding more and more of the East Coast people, and I just want to gather them all together and do something. I don't know what yet.
It would be neat to have a little convention, workshop, meetup thing. I would come down to the city for that.
So yeah, so definitely looking at some things in the future for that. We got some things cooking. Andrew Mullen has a cipher system question, and I think I vaguely know the answer. But in cipher system, how does your group handle the idea of hidden information or noticing things that would be covered by a D&D perception check? Player-driven rolls tripped me up there. So it's just your DM sets the DC, and you
Well,
would
yeah,
use your
but I think
mental
what
pool.
he means is if you require a perception check, the players know something's there.
Ah, yeah,
You
that's true.
automatically give them a certain meta knowledge, and it can be worked. I wouldn't mind seeing Monty Cook um, offer a solution to this down the line, but you can get around it with just kind of knowing what would their average roll be. Do they have, if you set the difficulty at what would say 5-15, because you have a difficulty in a target number. 5 times 3 is 15. It's the hardest thing to get through my player's head when we did Cypher was that. And then you figure if can they beat a 15, how often can they beat a 15, the kind of thing, and then do they have a perception skill which drops it down to a 4-12, and so you could do the roll for them, I think, at that point, and it breaks the only players roll rule, but I think you could do that without too much trouble, or just maybe have a I don't know, flip a coin, have a app, something. If you're worried about the whole, if I roll, they'll know something's up thing. You can have a dice rolling app on your phone that'll do the same thing without them maybe noticing specifically. So you could do it. I'd say do it for them in those cases if you don't want them to know something's up. The old, if you're in the woods and you want to know if they see the secret trail, but you don't want them to know that there may be a secret trail problem, I'd say roll it yourself.
Couldn't you do it through the intrusion system as well, though? There's probably something there.
That actually is a really fantastic idea. You could, do it nice and simple, where, here's the thing. They can notice something or they can not notice something, and if you don't want them to notice it, you give them the intrusion, you give them their points. I separate the, I call them brownie points. I separate the brownie points from the XP, because that's something I don't like about Cypher, is that the two are kind of combined. But yeah, I would see no problem with that either. Developing the intrusion system for that.
So it comes back to a little bit to like what I was saying about metagaming against yourself. Like as a player, if the DM calls for a roll and someone fails it, I'm not going to go, can I roll for that too, unless it makes sense for my character to maybe have some things have the same. But even people that claim to be the most diehard hard role players, and the story is more important to them every time, without fail, I see those same people go, "Oh, can I check too?" And I'm like,
well, it's that, and there's something to be said for perception of reality. Where basically once you know something's there, so unless you're the kind of GM that's always asking for perception checks when there's nothing there in order to trip them up, so they don't know when is the real perception checks and when are the fake perception checks. The minute you ask for perception check, even if they're dedicated to the role and dedicated to not knowing, some little part of them knows, and it may influence their behavior. So that's tough. You may want to just do a D&D style base perception where you have, you set the target number difficulty, and you say, okay, I know this person can make it, I know this person can't, and just don't assume since they're not being active, assume they can't do full spending, and just know if they can do it or not. It kind of violates the Cypher system, but that's the best way I can think of doing it.
That's what our house rules are for, no matter what the system is.
Yes.
You figure out what works for your group. Hey, comrade, I'm not sure what your question is, because you're saying answer yes or no here, but you didn't actually ask whatever the questions are.
Yes. No. The coin landed on its side, so it's maybe.
Maybe, yeah, exactly. You know what? If you're on, I don't know. I'm trying to think about how you can reach out to me if that's not working. Message me on the Facebook Nerdarchy page, and I will get it over there. So you can do that. And we are right up on the hour mark. So as always, it goes by really quick. James, I really appreciate you coming on. It's good to hang out with another East Coaster. And
yes, it was fun. We should meet in person soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I get a complex when I see all these people doing cool stuff on the other side of the country. I'm like, we need something. We need more cool stuff over here. But I'm finding it's here. We just got to get it together.
Well, up until PAX Unplugged, we had nothing in our area. It was until last year. So it's like you had Gen Con in the middle of the country and PaizoCon over on the other end of the country and Dragon Con over in the south. But
yeah.
So it's nice to see a convention I can drive to in less than 5 hours.
Yeah. Northeast represent.
Yeah.
So, again, James, thanks for coming on. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with us today. Really appreciate it. As always, it's been fun. And, guys, I will see you at the same time tomorrow.
Okay, bye.
Until next time, stay nerdy.